Welcome to the Public Voice Salon. We are an open dialogue on education, the arts, and social change. My name is John Bredin. I am an educator at Essex County College, where I teach English as an adjunct professor, and I'm also a writer. And today I have the great honor and pleasure of having on our program Professor China Clark. And indeed, I feel blessed to be here in China's lovely Jersey City apartment. It's so aesthetic and beautiful and spiritual, and I am also blessed to have China as my colleague at Essex County College, where she is also an adjunct professor of English, in addition to being a great playwright and philosopher, and just an overall source of inspiration to the people around her. She radiates this wonderful energy, and I'm just so blessed that she has joined us today, and we're going to have a dialogue on aesthetics, on education, on creativity, and whatever else will come up in our natural flowing dialogue here with China Clark. And so to begin our program, China, just, say a little bit about who you are, and maybe so the public can get a sense of your thoughts on education, on the arts, and possible social change.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me today. A little bit about who I am. I started off my career as an actress, and from there I got interested in writing, and I became a playwright. My first plays were produced by the great Joseph Patt many years ago, and from there I went on to be a television writer. I was a writer for Bill Cosby.
Goodness, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so my beginning years, the foundation of those years, basically all show business. But then later on, I got into teaching.
And just wondering how these different categories overlap and intersect, thinking about fame, for example. I always think today that there's a certain shallowness in our celebrity culture, this fame for the sake of fame. And yet, someone like myself, I also come from a family background of theater. My grandmother was brought to America by a famous actress named Blanche Walsh, who was a great star in the turn of the 19th century to the 20th century. My dad was in a play with Warren Beatty. I come from that background. I've also studied acting. I love movies, old movies. Claudia and I would love to watch the old classic movies on Turner Classics. So what is the qualitative shift today that you see? Do you notice anything in the culture that's tending towards a more superficial element of fame?
Yeah, of course. Years ago, people wanted to be famous because they had a great talent. They wanted to be famous because they had a great theory. They wanted to add something to the society, something of value. Now people simply want to be famous to make money. So, and this has been a shift. And it's also a shift in education. Many of the professors are not hired because they are the absolute greatest professors, that they care so much for what they're doing, their love of teaching. A lot of it is motivated by money. So this shift is in all walks of society. I was, when I studied acting, I studied with the great Herbert Burkoff. The great Burkoff. And I absolutely loved Herbert. However, it was not to become famous. It was to become a good actress, to know everything there was about acting, to love acting. No one ever went to Herbert and said, I want to be famous. he would kick you right out. But if you went and said, I want to learn about acting, and of course, many of his students, Al Pacino, many of his students absolutely did become famous. But I think that's what's missing. Before, people were famous because they had something special to add. Now they're just famous like
Miley Cyrus.
Yeah.
Rookie.
Yeah, and before, when we saw a good singer, she didn't have to take her clothes off for us to enjoy her songs. You see, so now it's not becoming famous for excellence. It's becoming famous just because you want to earn money and you want people to know you, but you're not thinking, what am I going to add to society? What do I have to give? And we see that in just about in everything now. It's not just young people who want to become famous. It's just it's in every walk of life. It's in every business. And that's what I see, and that's too bad, because it's not encouraging the young people to develop themselves. And that's what's bad about it. They're not developing themselves.
Yes. Claudia and I made our first movie 2 years ago, so we're also filmmakers now. Yeah. And the title of our film is called The Reinvention of Cinema Based on Human Values.
Oh, great.
And there's a certain complexity to it. It's very rough cut. It's a documentary style, but we also acted out a scene on the New Jersey Palisades, which is where Hollywood was born, with the Perils of Pauline. We were trying to interrogate that space as a kind of alternate universe of what Hollywood might be if it was about humanization. You also mentioned Herbert Berghoff, and he got together with Uta Hagen and founded the HB Studios, which is a wonderful school for acting on Bank Street, where I studied in 1999. I took an acting class there, and I did something on the stage that was very outside the box, and my teacher kind of chided me for it. But I'm going to tell you what I did. My teacher was Carol Morley, who was a great actress, and she's done a lot of significant parts in films like The Godfather. She played the nurse who wheeled Marlon Brando to safety when Al Pacino came in and said, they're trying to kill my father. You have to get my father in the other room. Great scene. Remember, and she didn't want to do it, and he basically said, come on, you got to help me with this. They're going to kill my father. But she was my teacher, and I had to act out a scene from my everyday life, something that you do ordinarily every day. Now, I like to read. So I got up on the stage and I simply read for 3 minutes. Well, she didn't like that. She said, that's not dramatic enough. You have to do something like brush your teeth or that. She didn't see that I was trying to take it to a place that was deeper, that was, really avant-garde. Now, for a long time, I felt shamed by that. I felt like, well, maybe I was doing something wrong. And it wasn't until I was reading a book by Richard Brody, who's the film critic for The New Yorker, about Jean-Luc Godard, who was one of my favorite French filmmakers.
Yes.
And Godard was as out there as they come. He was experimental. He was political. And in his very experimental phase, which was in the 1990s, he always dreamed of filming himself simply reading. And that's what he did. And I said, well, I was onto that before I even knew about Godard. And yet, so this idea that intellectuality has to be valued, this comes from my being a teacher. I also had that wanting to go into acting and show business when I was younger. I studied radio and TV broadcasting at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting in 1984. I was ready to go, and I said, I'm not ready for this. I don't know what I could possibly add that would enrich the discourse. It wasn't until I became a teacher that I really discovered my mission in life is to educate, to uplift, to transform consciousness in the people around me, and to be an agent of change, of social change, that I said, now I feel like I want to get involved in media, and that's what this is, this show, the Public Voice Salon. And I'm so happy that you're on it today, China, because you are a great blessing to be around. I'm so glad that you came to my Cultural Dialogue Circle, which meets at a cafe in the West Village on Jane Street. And also we're going to start to move it around and meet at different places. It's basically like an open salon. Now, I looked at your bookshelf behind me, and I see Simone de Beauvoir, and I see Sartre, and this is the rich intellectual thought that you have feasted on over the what is the significance of philosophy in your life and how you developed?
You know, it's very, very interesting for me. A beloved teacher by the name of Mr. Kessler, when I was 12 years old, began to talk to me about philosophy, and it didn't surface until years later. However, philosophy for me is really the only way that I see human beings actually freeing themselves. I don't think wars don't work. Absolutely, wars do not work. I think the only thing that's going to bring us to some kind of intellectual and spiritual synthesis is philosophy. And so as I traveled through the philosophers, I learned so much about the structure of mankind. I learned where I belonged in that structure. Through, of course, Sartre's existentialism, and particularly by being a indigenous Black American woman, the idea that the existentialist gets to choose what they want to be, to choose their own essence in life, and to go for that essence, and that no man or woman can block you from your choice or who you are. That was an epiphany for me as an indigenous Black American woman, because my education had been all against that I absolutely had no choice but to learn that man creates his own essence, and who you are is what you do. And so that's where you want to go back to your Godard story. Okay. See, Godard knew that. And so by what you were doing, this reading, this intellectual exercise, the exercise is mental. And that is just as strong action as any other action. So I think you really, truly were onto something when you did that. So, and through the philosophers, we learn the structure of mankind. We learn why we are thinking certain things. We learn, for example, it's very, very interesting now, with all the political stuff with Obama and all of this talk about Obama. Yeah. Well, if you read The Noble Lie from Plato's Republic, in Plato's Republic, he actually says, when a bronze man leads the Republic, there will be lots of conflict. There's so much written in philosophy that we can see played out in our lives today. And so this is where I began to learn about life. And this is where I started to get my oneness with all mankind. Because philosophy is the written thoughts of all mankind since the beginning of time. So intellectually and spiritually, there is a oneness in this long conversation. Of course, from the West, we start with Aristotle and Plato. But as we see the dialogue, as it has progressed from Aristotle all the way up to, let's say, Dr. King. And you can see this thread, how each idea influenced the next idea. Now, going back to your first issue, this is why I get a little bit afraid.
Okay.
Because a lot of people are not connecting with the growth of the intellectual idea step by step. They just want to be famous for anything. They have no connection with the past, with our history, the history of mankind. For example, one of my philosophy students, we were studying Machiavelli. So one very important idea in Machiavelli is the idea that Machiavelli says man should take power by any means necessary. So my student raised her hand and she says, Professor Clark, didn't Malcolm X say that? And I said, of course he said it. But Machiavelli said it 500 years ago. So, they're getting these ideas and they think they're perfectly new ideas. But Malcolm X studied philosophy. So he knew what to say. Dr. King studied philosophy. So he knew what to say to bring about civil rights. He studied ethics. So he knew how to be an ethical man. He studied what all the great thinkers had said throughout the beginning of time to make his point. You see, his fame didn't come from, you know what I'm trying to say. It came from a long line of intellectual thinkers and people devoted to humanity. And this is what we're missing. So going back to your exercise, that's perfect. The reading man. The reading man is perfect. It really is. It's beautiful. It's perfect. Because that's what the students need. They need the reading man. See?
I've never seen Sean Hannity reading on the air. I've never seen Bill O'Reilly reading on the air. But I think if we simply broadcasted people reading and talking about books and having these kind of intellectual discourses more often, we could create a transformation in our society and uplift and resist what's sort of a dumbing down that's been going on all this time. We are so blessed to have you on the show today, China, you're teaching charisma and you're teaching ideas to be broadcast out there onto the airwaves. Your students are very lucky to have you. And also, when you came to my cultural dialogue circle, I really learned a lot from you, from the stories you told that day. In particular, the stories of the people that you have inspired over the years, who include Roberto Benigni, who was a filmmaker who created this wonderful movie. It's A Beautiful Life, about a man who was trying to keep his son's happiness surrounded by the gloom and doom of Nazi Germany. And he was your student, and yet he came to you and he said, I have an idea, China, what do you think? Tell us what happened. Yes.
He came and he, a very lovely man with an enormous sense of humor. And he says, I have this idea. He says, but it takes place in a concentration camp. And it's a father who becomes a clown to influence his son. He says, what do you think? Will it work? I said, absolutely. I didn't know how well it worked until you told me today.
Okay.
I know he won an Academy Award for this film.
Yes.
But, I had so many students. Now, when I left Hollywood, because, again, I thought I needed more education. I wanted to develop myself more. And so when I left Hollywood and came back to New York, what I did is I started teaching script writing for films and television. And through that teaching, for the 20 years that I did that, just about every year, one of my students won an Academy Award. I had Spike Lee. I had
Spike Lee.
Yeah, I think Spike actually. I think Spike was the first. No. Spike wasn't the first famous person. Well, they weren't famous when they came to me. This is the story.
You made them famous.
No, I don't want to say all of that, but
humble.
But the glorious, the person I loved the most was a little girl named Gina Davis, and she came and she said she had some ideas and she wanted to make it in show business, and so she sat with me. And I told her, I gave her a list of things, when you get to Hollywood, know what you want to do, just don't go to Hollywood not knowing that, okay, after my show closes, I want to be a producer, I want to be a director, I want to do this or that. And I remember she had this beautiful handwriting. And she wrote down everything I said to her.
She took good notes.
She did. What a beautiful girl, and just a sweet person. I think I'm so proud of her. She did win an Academy Award. She had her own show. She produced. I think she even played the President of the United States on the television.
Wow.
So I think she was one of my first. And then, of course, Spike Lee came in, and Quentin Tarantino came in, and I even have a funny story about John F. Kennedy Jr.
Do tell.
So, okay, he was starting this magazine, and
George.
Yeah, the name of the magazine was George. So
okay.
he comes to my class, and I had all these kids. They would, if they had an idea, they would come to me first and ask me first, what do you think about this idea? He came and he asked me, what do you think about me putting a beautiful model on the cover of George?
Okay.
And I said, sounds good to me. You got somebody pretty up there, they're going to buy it. So it was quite an experience. Another wonderful experience I had when I was teaching script writing. One of the producers came to me. Now, you got to understand that when these people came to me, they weren't famous yet. So they were like students. And so one man came to me and he says, listen, he says, I have this character, and we're putting together a show. He says, but the character does all these horrible, horrible things. He's like a gangster. He says, what can I do to have the people love him? Anyway, so my answer to him was, any character that you want people to like, no matter what they do, you have to tell the people why they do it. So he says, okay. He says, I was thinking of having a psychiatrist on the show, but since I talked to you, I'm going to build up the psychiatrist part. I said, okay. So one time I'm looking at television. There were so many, John, that sometimes I forgot. I forgot about them. There's so many kids at one time coming through. So I'm looking at television. I see this guy beat somebody in the head with a baseball bat. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. This is the show that the guy came to me, The Sopranos.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Look, not only that, the psychiatrist that we talked about, even though she was a false psychiatrist, a fake psychiatrist or a movie star psychiatrist. I think a group of psychiatrists gave her an award. Not only that, the soprano, Tony, right?
Right.
Became the man most young people wanted to be their father.
Oh, boy.
I said, oh my goodness. So then I started to rethink a little bit that. I said, you know what? If all these young people come to you and ask you ideas and all these things, and they go right out and do them, I begin to think maybe I would serve better if I were, maybe teaching the kids from the community, or maybe I could be more helpful.
Inner city kids.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that is that. But I had a lot of fun for a lot of years. I remember Quentin came to me when he wanted. Well, I had met him years before he came to my class.
In the video store, right?
Yes, he was working in a video store, and he was bothering me. I was trying to get Oliver Stone films, and he kept walking around the video store. Why do you want Oliver Stone films? Because I love Oliver Stone. I don't know why you love Oliver Stone. I don't know why you love this guy. So you know what I said to him? I said, listen, instead of coming down on Oliver Stone, why don't you get all of his films and see what he's doing? See what Oliver Stone is doing that makes him the greatest filmmaker in the world, and you working in the video store.
Because he wanted to be a filmmaker.
He wanted to be a filmmaker at that time, so he was very frustrated. And so anyway, the funniest thing about that story is that guess who produced his first movie? Oliver Stone.
Oh, look at that.
And then Quentin came when he was just before he was going into Pulp Fiction, and he truly wanted to know about the use of the N-word. And how is that going to work? Is it too much? And my advice to him, and he did it, I thought he did it very well. You see, you have to let characters talk. Every character has a philosophy of life, from the highest to the lowest. The writer can't censor everything a character has to say. And my advice to him was, see what your character's philosophy of life is. And if that's part of it, use it. And I think he did it. Pulp Fiction was great. It was really great. And he also asked some structural questions about the structure of the film. And he asked me, I remember specifically, he says, can you change the structure? Can you put the last act in the second act or whatever? Says, absolutely. If you know any form, if you know the form, you can play with the form. And he did that great in Pulp Fiction. So I just had so many kids for so many years, and so many absolutely wonderful experiences. Some I remember. Some I don't remember until maybe I see them on television. There was one that I had that came to my class. I didn't remember him very, very much, and I didn't think he was very funny. However, this was years later, I saw a film. It was about these, I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, it was about these soldiers who were supposed to be actors, and then they got caught up in the jungle, and the people thought they were real soldiers. Anyway, it was the funniest thing I had ever seen in my life. And then I realized Ben Stiller, that this he had taken my class.
Oh my goodness.
But it was, and I laughed at that movie until I cried. It was so funny to me. And then I said, Ben Stiller, yes, I remember him, from my class. So many of them, I remember if I see their names, and then it comes back to be what we talked about or what they commented on. So that was a very, very good time in my life when I was a script writing teacher.
Here we have the star maker, folks. Here she is. And we are blessed to have you with us here today, China. And I guess if we ever want to become famous, we know who to talk to. But it's very enriching to be in this dialogue with you, especially because I'm also very concerned, as I said, with reconceptualizing and reimagining what fame is. And the fact that you have done all this, that you've had this impact on people's lives who've gone on to do, amazing things, culturally in the culture, shows you that, first of all, I would advise you to write a book about this. I think it would be wonderful to have chapters on all these ways that you have pedagogically impacted leaders in our culture, people who have gone on to great visibility, but also I think in particular now for the project of creating a world that's more loving and more caring and more peaceful, and to create a kind of fame around that. That's my interest, like I was watching the Academy Awards the other night, and there was a kind of superficiality that I felt that was really rather meaningless after a while. It becomes like these award ceremonies, and that to me it was all summed up by that selfie photo that Ellen DeGeneres took. It was kind of really vapid, and I felt really repulsed by that in a way, because I think it shows a kind of narcissism and an emptiness in the culture. And as I was looking at the celebrities in the audience, they kind of look bored to me. Bill Murray looked bored when he was giving one of the awards. These people are bored with the way the culture is going. It wasn't like this in the 70s. It wasn't like this in the 60s. It's sort of really jumped the shark, as they say. The culture has jumped the shark, which is an expression from the TV show Happy Days, when Fonzie jumped over the shark with the water skis. And when anything jumps the shark, that means it's over. And you mentioned Obama earlier, and when the bronze man comes to power, but I think it's more has to do with his being in cahoots with Wall Street and the corporate sector. If there's going to be a bronze man in power, I would rather it be someone like Cornel West, or someone we need a real transformation in our society, and I think people like yourself have a lot potential to play in that process. If we look around this room, Claudia, you look behind us, you see these wonderful photos. Here's China when she was. When was this taken, China? This is beautiful, beautiful. Oh my goodness, look at this. California, you've been around to so many places, and I feel an aesthetic energy with you, around you. I feel a spiritual energy and an intellectual energy. And I think all of these things are combining. And I think it's also a psychological process. It's a process of finding our growth, finding our voices. How lucky that your students are that you left this fame and fortune culture to nurture them, and at the same time how unfair it is that you are not being nurtured financially. When Roberto Benigni made a movie that grossed $50 million worldwide, and here you are, and me, I know the two of us in the same boat schlepping around as adjunct professors on a starvation wage. And I'm also involved with trying to transform that. I created an organization called the Ethical Business Society. I have a radio show now called New Bottom Line, which is trying to create a new bottom line where I think we need to think in terms of money for good things. Money needs to flow to the good people and the good projects that are changing the world and saving the world. And I think these kind of discussions that you and I are having now, And I think we could build on that and have more people involved. And you could be a regular on our show. And then maybe you will become famous. Maybe you will make the Fame Maker famous or something like that. Does that make any sense to you? Or?
Well,
Yeah.
you know, it really doesn't bother me so much because the student, I feel, should always go further than the teacher. However, teachers are being put in a terrible situation right now in America, especially in the college system, where we have to, most of us work as adjunct professors, part-time professors with full schedules and full workloads. So it's very, very, very difficult. And it's hard because some of the teachers are so dedicated. Some of them are so wonderful. And but no one is really looking out for us financially. So it's a terrible, terrible thing. So we're teaching the students, we're trying to inspire them, uplift them, but yet we really can't get paid well for what we do. So that is a huge, huge, huge problem. I didn't foresee this problem early on. I never saw this coming. But I do see it now, and I know perfectly well what you're talking about.
Now, China, you also have a play that you're working on now, I understand, because in addition to your teaching, you're continuing your writing, which I think is a wonderful thing. I'm also writing and teaching at the same time. I think one of the problems of our academic culture now, especially in the adjunct world, is that most adjuncts don't have time to do both. And the thing about teaching is that when you're not writing and you're not building yourself up intellectually, which is what you do when you write, your teaching then becomes watered down. It becomes harder to find yourself and who are you really. You're just schlepping from this class to that class, and you lose sight of that intellectual culture that you come out of. So you're working on a play, and I understand they're going to produce this in New Orleans.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. What happened is I taught a black writers class last summer, and I was so inspired by the students, their research of all the black writers, and we did something on the great black blues singer Bessie Smith. I had a play about Bessie Smith, but the students inspired me so much that I went back and I rewrote it. And sent it to a producer in New Orleans, and he absolutely loves it. So we're going into production with that. So the inspiration goes back and forth from the student to the teacher.
Yes.
And when it's like that, that is what teaching should be about.
This would be a good time for me to also say that the inspiration for this television show that you're watching now is my teaching. This is a pedagogically inspired show because the way I teach, just like you, I try to unleash that creativity in the classroom, have a lot of open dialogue, a lot of storytelling. And I thought to myself one day, this feels so good. It's helping my students, it's helping me grow also, the way I teach in a very growthful way, that I think I want to take the show on the road. And I want to bring this out there into the airwaves where there's so much distortion and so much lies and so much emptiness and so much cliche and so much corporate sponsored media, which is just numbing, you know. And I want to break through that numbness out there, that break through that submergence in the routine, the ordinary. The people are being smothered by this corporatocracy, corporate media. And I want to break through there with creativity, with inspiration. And so being here in this dialogue with you is very important to me now. It's very important in the evolution of our show that we got you into this dialogue. And it was very spontaneous how we met on Friday morning. I was on my way way to teach in Newark, which is a very interesting place in itself. So it sort of has a spiritual energy. It's this monolithic city that had rough times, but it's now reconstituting itself, and there's many different facets of the community, and there's a lot of artists there, a lot of growth is happening, and we just bumped into each other in Penn Station. We rode the bus together, and I said, China, you need to come on the show. And here you are. We're making it happen. We're having a dialogue, and I really want the people watching this to realize that they also can go for their dreams. Absolutely. I'm teaching a class now outside the classroom, China. I developed my own course. And it's called Find Your Voice, Tell Your Story, and Achieve Your Dreams. And I kind of think all those things are interconnected, because as you begin to find your voice, then you could tell your story better, and then you could go for your dreams. So you're a person who's not only gone for your dreams, but you also helped other people, like Roberto Benigni, go for their dreams. And now, in our country and in our world, my dream is to have a better world, to save the planet, first of all, from ecological destruction, which it's heading toward, and to bring our democracy back, to restore a real democracy in America. What do you think about those dreams?
I think they're great dreams to have. We really all need to work on democracy. One of the complaints that so many of the students have is that they're not being treated fairly. So we all need to work on democracy, fairness, ethics. Some university are teaching secular ethics. They're teaching compassion. Because that is becoming a lost art. So, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think this is something that is very, very needed. But in order for people to have democracy, they have to be democratic in their daily workings with people. We can't blame this on the government. When you're not democratic or fair or honest with another human being, how do you expect for the government to be if you're not? So these are the things, and this is what's missing. This day-to-day connection, this ethical connection. The students themselves, so many of them, have to learn how worthy they are. That they are worthy as anyone on this earth. And this is a huge problem. And so that's why so many of them don't feel like they can reach their dreams or their goals. And I know you teach them that they can, and I appreciate you for that. I love you for that, as a matter of fact.
Thank you.
But everybody is not mentoring them that way. So, democracy is a thing that we all have to practice on a daily basis. See, everybody wants their freedom. But you have to allow other people to be free as well. I can't fight for my own freedom and block your freedom. Do you see, how's that going to work for us? We have to learn to respect all men's freedoms, to respect all men and women's dreams.
I want to go back to acting for a second, because my dad was an actor, as I said, when he was a young man. But he gave up the acting when he got married, because he thought that was the ethical choice, to be a happily married man and not to be out on the road, to give his time and energy to his family. But then he became an activist in his 30s. And for me, there's always a link between acting and activism. And so my father was fighting the powers, that be up in Edgewater, these developers who were building these big out-of-scale projects, and he would go around and give out flyers to go to council meetings, and I was 16 years old, and first time I actually gave out flyers and did some political activity. So for me, you see, freedom comes in action.
Yeah.
You said about Sartre. Sartre said to act is everything. And I think, to me, to go back to Obama now, who was a lawyer, I think lawyers should be banned from running for office from now on. I think teachers should get involved in politics. People who have a humanistic spirit.
Yes.
This education program that Obama has been pushing, which I've only recently looked into, it's called Common Core. It's awful. And the teachers now are rebelling against it because the kids are suffering with this boring curriculum which takes the humanities out, which takes the philosophy out, okay, which takes the art and culture out. And it's all about memorizing for standardized tests, creating this passive citizenry that will not be able to think critically. And now New York State just voted no confidence, the union, in this Common Core. They're going to refuse to teach this teaching to the test, which Obama is pushing, which the technocrats are pushing. We need some kind of a transformation in this culture. And I heard that Bernie Sanders is going to be running for president. He might run for president. He's a socialist, and he's an independent from Vermont, great senator, and he's trying to decide between running as a Democrat or as an independent. And if he doesn't run as a Democrat, I think that could be a very positive thing for the third-party movement in our country, because the two major parties seem to have a stranglehold on the power, and that's what controls the educational system now.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you completely. I think this teaching for the test, it's brutal. Young people should be taught to think critically, and to read, to write, to think, and most importantly, to express themselves. You see, if they're just learning to memorize what other people say, where's the synthesis, the intellectual synthesis in that? The dialectic is being left out. And that is important. You see? And that's what makes a thinker.
I'm so happy, China, that you came to my cultural dialogue circle, because this is my attempt to recreate that salon culture that once existed in places like Paris, where you had Gertrude Stein, with Hemingway would come in there, and Picasso. And in New York, you had Mabel Dodge, had a salon on 5th Avenue, 23 5th Avenue. Bill Haywood, who was a big labor guy, would come through there, and Marcel Duchamp and people like that. So do you see any of that happening around? It seems to be absent today. And do you think we could be part of recreating that?
You know what? I'd love to recreate that with you. There is a friend of mine in Paris who has this wonderful salon. I've done my lectures there.
Wow.
And every Sunday night, she has a poet or a writer, and they get together and they have dinner, and they discuss music and art and literature and philosophy and politics, and we really need that. You know, we need that dialogue, and this is how we grow intellectually. You know, just because you're a teacher, you should not stop growing. You should not stop learning. You see, I learn every day from my students. And that's why I love teaching, because the teacher becomes the learner as well. And this is what has kept me in it, because I have, I'm doing Descartes. And so in preparing for my lecture for Descartes, I have to study it, reevaluate it, think about it again, And this way, I'm learning more and more about Descartes. You know?
Wow. And as they say, the teacher must be taught.
Yes.
And also, Bell Hooks, who is also a great thinker and feminist, intellectual, pedagogy person, she says that the teacher is a healer, and therefore the healer must also be healed. So there's a healing aspect of being in community and being socially connected and interconnected. And I also want to talk a little bit about love, because love is always, for me, very important. And if it wasn't for the love of my wife, Claudia, who came into my life and helped me believe that I could go for my biggest dreams, then once I met Claudia, my writing came forward and producing books, and the television show came into existence with her nurturance and love and caring and being in relationship. And there's a whole new way of thinking about logic, epistemologically, and it's coming from a feminine paradigm as well. Women's Ways of Knowing is a very important book written by a group of women philosophers who basically talk about this epistemology of caring and love. All of us were loved by somebody, or we wouldn't be here today. And part of my dream with my radio show is called New Bottom Line, and I come out of a discourse of spiritual politics. I belong to an organization called the Network of Spiritual Progressives, created by Michael Lerner and Cornel West. Now, Cornel West is going to be in Newark on April 2nd. He's going to give a lecture at the Bethany Baptist Church. I'm going to definitely try to be there. But this discourse that, we need a bottom line that's based on love and caring. That companies and institutions should be judged as efficient and effective, not just on the basis of expanding money and power, which is the current model, which is destructive, but on how they treat the community, how they promote caring and generosity and love. Love is a philosophical category that we're missing the education about love.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And you see, when I have a student, I love that student. It's a love that maybe is hard to explain, from a secular point of view. How can you love someone whom you don't know? But as a teacher, there is something in my spirit and my soul, and I recognize them when they approach as a student. I recognize my obligation spiritually to that young person. When we think about the great philosopher Socrates, how Socrates taught his students. Socrates said, you can say anything to your student, but how they learn is from your basic character. So students learn from love. If you support them, if you care about them, they do much better than if you don't love them.
And the other aspect here that I want to add to this dialogue is that there is a historical knowledge that we're missing now, that we're not getting. I was an English major, but I had a minor in history, because I didn't know what to major in at first. So I was sort of bouncing around between different subjects, and I was tinkering with being in a business major, and I said, I don't want to do that. Because people tell you got to be practical, But I wanted something deeper and richer and more intellectual, so I studied literature, but I have a double minor in business and history. So I studied European history and American history, and I think we're missing that now. We're missing the politics, the history of social movements, what Martin Luther King did, who was Malcolm X, who was FDR, what was the New Deal, what was the Socialist Party and the Communist Party. This seems to be an historicity. We've become ahistorical with these standardized testing, and so I always try to bring that discourse into my classroom. I try to bring politics and history because I think it's connected with writing and English and growing. And does that make any sense?
It makes absolute sense. We took a look at Marx last week, and the students were so excited because when you look at Marx and you explain the proletariat and the bourgeois, well, they started screaming, "Well, Professor Clark," and their stories started to absolutely pour out.
Wow.
About how they're treated, you know, when they work in the different grocery stores, and how, you know, people are working so hard now, but not getting ahead. It seems like the people at the top are the ones who are getting ahead. And those ideas in Marx are the same things that we see in this society today. People are manufacturing things that they can't even afford to buy.
Or they're not even necessary things. Why are we making things that are not needed? Or
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's this productivity is lacking humanity. The humanity of people, and that's being damaged, and the students recognize this right away.
Yes.
They recognize it immediately. You know, and they say, "Professor, why can we have 1% of the world owning all the money, and then 99% of us are fighting with each other over what's left?" Over what's left, which is nothing, because they own 99% of it. 1% owns 99% of all the wealth. And if we're fighting for 1%, and they recognize this right away, especially in the context.
Yes. Well, Bernie Sanders, 2016, get on the bandwagon. Run for office, get involved in third parties, the Green Party, the Socialist Party. We have a socialist councilwoman elected in Seattle. So there's a lot of possibilities we can do, but to be in dialogue, to shatter the silences, which what we're doing now in this incredible dialectic. We feel so honored and blessed and grateful to have you on our show today, China, and we welcome you back. I hope this is only a beginning, and I look forward to further enriching discourse with you, either on the air or off the air.
Thank you so much. You know, I always enjoy you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.